Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion.
You profit from fear and hate, hoarding wealth and amassing power. The walls have been unleashed. We will not submit or cower. It's humanity's darkest side. We are ruled by thieves and liars.
So the first order of business today is just a brief update. Just this past Monday, so it's actually coming up on a week. It was just after I did my last episode. We ended up having, if everyone remembers, about a month ago, I was talking about the story of Count Dankula, who is a YouTuber who ended up getting arrested and brought and pulled into UK court over a YouTube video that he put out. And this video was he taught his pug to do the Nazi salute, and he had showed it on the video of him watching a Hitler speech. The whole idea was it was supposed to be a joke, take something that's cute and innocent and have it doing something that's evil, It's a joke behind everything, but this was enough to get him hauled into court, and he was found guilty of I forget the charge right now, gross misconduct or something like that, or gross imagery. It was some BS charge that he ended up getting called on, and then originally he was supposed to get sentenced within a few days, but then they ended up extending that to a month. And a lot of people believe that this was due to all the attention that Count Dankula had brought with him, because, again, being a YouTuber, being active online, many people were aware of what's going on, and many people saw it as a free speech fight. So they ended up pushing it back by a month. I assumed it was mostly to do with just them wanting to avoid as much publicity as possible with this situation. So as it turns out, Count Dankula ended up getting a fine. That was it, just a fine for 800 pounds. So we're talking, what, $1,100, $1,200 US or something like that? So considering what it could have been, it's good to hear that it ended up turning out to be nothing, considering how this for him could have been a possibility of losing some of his freedom, of getting put in a prison cell. The fact that he only got hit with a fine worth 800 pounds is awesome, and there's been GoFundMe pages and other campaigns that have been undergo for Count Dankula, so this fine is already paid off for him, plus much is left over for him in order to help get his life back on track. Thankfully, this could have been worse for him, but it's not. But we shouldn't be too happy that he only got an $800 fine, because the point is he never should have been charged with this sort of thing in the beginning. The idea that somebody can be hauled into a courtroom over a joke is a scary situation these days. And it's not just restricted to the UK right now. We have something similar even going on in our own country. There have been several comedians who have found themselves in front of the Human Rights Tribunal over jokes that they've made. And some of them have even been forced to, make compensation, pay fines, whatever it happens to be. So this is also something that affects us here in Canada. So this is why the idea of the story of the Count Dankula trial was very important. It's very important to everybody across the internet, because this is exactly what's under attack right now. It's our idea of freedom of speech and our idea of being able to post our own feelings, our own thoughts online without having the government come after us. And one thing that the UK government has already proved by now is they'll go after Count Dankula for a joke like this, and they'll go after other people who say mean things about, let's say, Muslims, but then they're not doing their actual jobs when the time comes. See, the UK police have been heavily involved right now with PR. They've been doing a lot to put themselves in front of the spotlight to the people and trying to make it seem as if they're doing a good job. They're doing so much PR simply because the police in the UK are not doing their jobs, because they require this PR to make people believe that they are doing a good job, because all we're hearing out of this, if they're not going after people for making jokes or saying cruel things online to the Muslim rape gangs, then we're hearing about how much violence is coming out of America. Right now, there's something about every 90 seconds in the UK. I think I actually just said America, I meant the UK. All the violence is coming out of the UK. Right now, as it stands, there's something like a machete attack in the UK every 90 minutes. This was not a problem that they had just a few years ago. And on top of this, we've also been hearing about how over the last few years, these Muslim grooming gangs, these rape gangs, have become much more prominent and in fact are starting to go after the British citizenry itself. Well, I shouldn't say started. They've been doing this for some time. But people are now starting to become aware of this. So the UK police are refusing to do their job, and they're trying to make small times shitty arrests in order to fuel the idea that they actually are necessary. But all they have to do is their proper jobs, and then people would be fine. People wouldn't be here criticizing them. But that doesn't appear to be the case. It appears that right now, policing and the government in the UK is completely fucked. Now, this is all going down underneath a quote-unquote conservative government in the UK. Theresa May is the Prime Minister, yet she's supposed to be head of the Conservative Party, yet she's botched the Brexit. She's been big in importing immigrants right now, even though this was one of the main problems with the Brexit is, along with working, had to do with immigration, considering the UK people didn't have much of a say. Because what was going on with the UK with the Brexit is the fact that anybody from around Europe could come into the country, could come work, and this was pissing off some of the British because they were also had a great economy. They had one of the best economies in the European Union at the time. I don't know where it stands right now, but this was fueling some of their resentment towards the European Union. So this was one of the reasons for Brexit, and she's already botched that up. She's not even upholding some of the values that are supposed to be behind this Brexit, such as reduced immigration, because that's one of the big ones that was on there. And this is all underneath a conservative government. Not to mention that the fact that the police have gone so much to shit actually proves that she is not even close to running an effective conservative government. Because one thing that's always been about the right-wingers and the conservatives is they are about the rule of law. They are about the police, as an example. They are in support of the police, and they want the police to do their jobs and uphold the law. Well, this shouldn't be too hard to do for a conservative government. This is right up their alley. This is part of their MO. But since Theresa May has come into charge, the rights of the British people have just continued to be eroded. And this is why right now the Count Dankula case receives so much attention from the online community. The only problem is that I saw with it is the fact that it was only the online community that took notice of this. When it came to the average people, no one really knew what was going on. Nobody knew who Count Dankula was. On the day of his sentencing, he ended up holding a march in which many people marched with him down to the courthouse, and it was in protest of the sentencing, about what he'd been charged with. And despite this, many British people weren't aware of what the protest was for. So I think that one thing that the people who are involved in the online community need to do is do a better job at informing the people who are not involved in the internet culture about what is really going on, because as it stands, they're relying on the establishment news. It's not really like they were reporting on the Count Dankula case or anything that was going on with that. That was all coming from online. This was Count Dankula posting to his Twitter or other social media accounts. People that he knew were posting on there, and then the word got spread. So many people were unaware of this whatsoever. So this is why I think it's important for people who are involved in the online culture to start spreading around some of the information that is only available to us online, because then a situation such as what happened to Count Dankula can actually receive more attention. And who knows, maybe by doing this we can actually prod the mainstream media into reporting on these situations. Maybe not, but we'll end up seeing. So that was just a brief update about Count Dankula, and now on top of it, moving on to our next subject. As things have been unfolding with the Toronto attack that took place just this past week, it was I was quite sad. There was actually a vigil that was held on Sunday. I'm recording this on Sunday evening, Monday morning. It's already technically the 30th, so there was a vigil held just this past day for the victims of the attack. So far as it stands, we have up to 10 dead, and we had, I guess right now it's about 14 or 15 that were injured. But as the story has been developing, I've been starting to notice that there's some inconsistencies that are developing, and this mostly has to do with surrounding the killer, Alecmination, this terrorist who ended up committing the van attack. So what I've been seeing that's causing me to have a lot of questions about this whole situation is how the reporting has gone from Nation, from the first time we heard his name, which was roughly about Tuesday, the 24th of April, was when his name was starting to come out. We were starting to figure out who he was, what this was for. And we know now, as it stands, that this had to do with him as being a member of, being part of Incel, which is involuntary celibate. Now, I already went on my rant last time about the involuntary celibates, how I think they're pathetic. They're just guys that don't know how to interact with women, or at least don't know how to interact with women in a flirtatious way, in a way that would lead to a relationship. A lot of these guys rely on them being the nice guy, being different than the average guy, and that is their strategy to try and sneak in. However, actually my wife had a perfect example, a perfect word for this. I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but she says these type of guys, these nice guys, they're kind of going on the idea of the 10th one is free. Every time that these guys do something nice for the woman, by about, in their minds sort of thing, by about every 10th time they've done something, they should get a free fuck out of it. This is kind of the idea of what these guys are going on. And I've already talked about how pathetic that was. But more specifically, when we're talking about what's going on with Nation, is that when we were first starting to hear about Alecmination and who he was, his past, well, the first original stories we were hearing about had some very odd behavior that Nation was taking part in. So when he was in high school, where most of these stories are coming from, a lot of people are talking about how he was very socially awkward, but to an extreme degree. He kept to himself, didn't really seem to have many friends. But what he would do would be odd. He would essentially act like a cat. He'd meow at people. He'd bite at people. He would sit there in class and lick the back of his hand like he was grooming himself like a cat. So many people have said that this is... So many people have been talking about how Nation, this is exactly how he was growing up. He was just so socially awkward that he used to act like a cat I guess, trying to relate to his other classmates. He didn't understand that his actions were so odd. But on top of this, Nation would act out. He wasn't necessarily violent, but he would cause a lot of ruckus. He would act out. They had person from the school who was specifically there to deal with Nation, who was there to handle Alecmination himself. Didn't have any other students that she had to work with, and this assistant would be there to hold Nation's hand and prevent him from getting too riley up in class. So this is what we're hearing off the start. Over the last few days now, we're starting to hear quite a different story. We're starting to hear about how Nation was in fact quite intelligent. We're starting to hear about how Nation was was in school. He was going to Seneca College, and he'd been there since around 2011 or 2012, right up to this right now, pretty much, right until he committed this attack. They were saying even that he was supposed to even supposed to graduate by May, and then he was going on to work better jobs. But ever since then, we've been starting to... But this is the difference of the narrative now, is he's gone from, in high school, being completely socially awkward with some form of Asperger's or some form of autism, to now suddenly he does very well. He's, as some of them people, he went out for a job interview just before, a couple days before the attack took place, and the employers described him as the best candidate they never hired because he didn't end up getting the job. This is not making sense to me, because this guy was 25 years old. He graduated in something 2011, 2012, something around there. And he's been involved in school ever since then. Yet he's gone from acting like a cat to being called an intelligent guy with nothing out of the ordinary about him. Let me just see if I can pull it up right here. There's also been some inconsistencies with the narrative concerning police, because some people are saying he was known to police, and then the Toronto police are saying he wasn't known to police. Right now, the narrative seems to be sticking with he was not known to Toronto police. So it's very hard to tell exactly what is going on with everything. So, actually, yeah, here we go. Hold on. Let me just get it open there. This was not something... article I did not come prepared for, so I just got to quickly find it and open it for you guys. But I've been very curious while I've been following this Mination stuff. Just, he's been very, very, very different narrative from what it originally started out as. All right, here we go. So as we can see here from this article from CBC, it ends up saying when it's talking about this. It says here, Alecminations was a month away from completing his degree at Toronto Seneca College when he reached out to an information technology recruitment firm looking for a job. The recruiter, who asked not to be identified, said Minasian seemed to be intelligent and an articulate guy with no issues with written communication. An intelligent and articulate guy is probably not the words you would use to describe somebody who acts like a cat. Now, this is several years on. This is several years since we've been hearing these reports from high school. So it's possible that he has gotten some sort of help along this time. It's possible that while this is going on, he has recovered from his... he has recovered from a lot of his social anxiety. But to me, it still doesn't make sense that he could have gone from acting like a cat to 6 or 7 years later on being a completely normal member of society. How does somebody do that? I've dealt this too, and besides, Minasian went to, it was a he was in a special needs class in high school, so I've had plenty of experience dealing with people with special needs or as some form of autism, and to me, this sort of turnaround is unprecedented. This sort of turnaround just doesn't happen with people like this, and not as quickly at the very least. I would guess that it would take at least another decade for him before he could get up to a position that we would consider normal, that he'd be able to interact with people that would be considered normal. I mean, I'm just going off on my own thought process right here. But to me, that has been the weirdest part of all this. Just the fact that he's gone from cat-like to completely articulate with no issues with written communication. Now, even when they were talking about him in high school, they were talking about how he seemed to be good with computers. So I don't see, I could see this as a big possibility. This is where it seemed to be his field was focused in, is dealing with computers, so that does make a little more sense. But this guy was also developing several different apps. He was developing an app for something to do with wine, and then he was developing another app for parking in Toronto so people could use it and go online and figure out where a parking spot is free. This is not the ideas, and this is not the sort of thing that comes out of a mentally disturbed individual. So this is, for me, where I've had the biggest problems when we're discussing the Minasian incident. Others have bigger problems. For instance, I know that there's some people right now that are showing are looking very closely at the videos that was taken on that day, and then they're looking at the pictures of Minasian that are available online, and they have some problems with it. I know one of the big ones that I've heard is some people are saying that the picture of Minasian in the papers that we've been seeing going around, which comes off of his Facebook profile, he looks to be lighter in that photo than in the video we saw of him getting arrested. In the video on the day of the attack, when the cop ended up chasing him down and arresting him, the man who they're arresting does look darker. Also, on top of this, Minasian... this man that was arrested was bald, and then Minasian seemed to have a pretty decent set of head of hair by the time he appeared in court the next day. So some people are also taking focus on this. Personally, maybe there's something there. I haven't found too much yet to back up this idea that it's not Minasian who was arrested. But for me, it's really just the narrative that's going on about his past that I find is most suspicious. I mean, it's possible that I'm just reading too much into it, but like I've said, I don't know that many people that can turn around so quickly, that can go from such a bad place to being in such a successful one so quickly. So for me, that's my biggest questions when we're dealing with Alecminations is really that. Regardless, the attack itself was regardless of that though, the attack itself was just fucking brutal. On top of this too, is there was an article that came out from the Toronto Sun, and this actually caused a bit of a stir inside the Toronto correctional facilities, because it was leaked, actually, this information to the Toronto Sun. And in there we found out that during questioning, Alecmination was asked when was the last time he asked a woman out on a date, and he said 2012, and she said no. Well, it's 2018. So he's saying it's been 6 years since the last time he asked a woman out on a date. Then he's turning around and claiming he's an involuntary celibate. How can you be an involuntary celibate if you have not tried? Because, I mean, they were stating in some of his old classmates from high school that even then he said that he was scared of girls. Now, I'm sure he means he was just scared to talk to girls. He probably had a big fear of rejection by women. And this is where a lot of his frustration is coming from. But this goes back to what I was just saying a little bit earlier about these incel people, is how pathetic they are, because they're trying to claim as if they're being treated unfair. How dare these women not sleep with them? How dare these women ignore them? But meanwhile, they're not doing much in the way of trying to attract women. How is Alecmination, how is he going to sit there and claim that he's being treated unfairly, that these women have treated him unfairly, when he's not even going out of his way to try and ask a woman on a date? That is literally the first step. If even your focus is on sex and not even a relationship, that is the first step to sex, as well as a relationship, is you need to get to know the person on the other side. Unless you're happen to be so lucky that you meet a woman that's willing to sleep with you right away, which, again, you probably don't want to sleep with her if she's willing to sleep with you right off the bat, or prostitution. Those are the only two other ways that I can think of that you could possibly get laid without going looking for it, or putting in any effort. So Alecmination didn't put any effort into asking women out. He didn't put any effort on bettering himself. He didn't put any effort on bettering his approach. And then he turns around and commits a van attack like this. And actually, I said on last time when I was addressing the Toronto attack, I said, what did this solve? What did this do for you? It's not guaranteed that this was actually the reason why he decided in this area of the city to go drive into the pedestrians, but considering how 8 of the people dead were women, my guess is he happened to be, as he was driving by, he happened to see a lot of these pedestrians on the side of the road, and he happened to notice that a majority of the pedestrians who were there were women. That's my guess, and then I think that's what happened. And then when he saw that, my guess is that's when the moment he decided that he was going to turn into these pedestrians and mow them down. I do believe that he was looking for more groups of women. So this whole thing around Alecmination has just been horrific, and the other thing I don't like about it is that the media is really playing this up right now. They're playing it up for the sake of, well, I don't know. It seems like it's a fear tactic to me, because first of all, when this idea of the incel comes out, the idea that it was because he was involuntary celibate, when this came out, the media within a day or two came back with this in-depth report coming out of CBC. I think the Toronto Star may either took the CBC one and reposted on their website, or maybe they did their own, but they had one too, I'm pretty sure. But these in-depth analysis into these incel groups, which, number one, they didn't name any incel groups in this report. It's not like they went in and said, this incel group, this incel group, this incel group. These are the names of them. They also were saying that these incel people were celebrating the attack. Well, once again, they didn't post any any screenshots of anything being said. All they did was put stuff in quotation marks and said, like, people are calling Alecmination God Gentleman Alecmination or High Gentleman Alecmination now, or saying how the incel rebellion is here, but they haven't actually provided the evidence to say that this is actually going on. So I'm not going to trust the mainstream media when they decide to go in an in-depth investigation into the internet culture, because they barely touch the surface whenever they do this. I wouldn't be surprised if they just went on a Wikipedia page and then this was their whole investigation. The bare fucking minimum. I'm not going to trust the mainstream media with that. The other problem I have with that is the fact that they are now trying to present these incel groups as if they are a main part of culture, both online and real life culture, when these groups are just fringe groups. I mean, I've heard of incel groups and people who call themselves incel before, but very, very, very rarely have they really come across my screen. But the media is presenting as if this is a very normal part of the internet, as if this is a very normal part, and a lot of boys and a lot of guys are involved with these incel groups, and that this is a rising phenomenon that needs to be combated as soon as possible. No, not at all. This is not at all what they are. These are a small group of pathetic individuals who need to get together on their little online groups, because in real life, they got nothing. If they were to step out behind the keyboards, they don't have anything going for them, but it makes them seem tough. Also, this idea that 4chan is the one who radicalized Alecmination is another ridiculous idea from the mainstream media. That one I think is actually more dying down. That one I heard of for a day or two, and then it really seemed to disappear, probably because it was a completely ridiculous idea that 4chan was the one who radicalized them. 4chan is an image board. 4chan is a place where you go to get information and where anonymous people go to bitch at each other and whatever happens to be going on online. This is not some sort of group that is plotting something behind the scenes. This is not some sort of Western jihadi group of some sort. I use the term jihadi, but without any reference to Islam or anything like that. I just sort of the same idea. This is sort of the way they're presenting that 4chan is. They radicalized him, sort of like ISIS did to many other individuals, when of course it's nothing even remotely of the sort has gone on. Sure, maybe he spent some time on 4chan. I wouldn't put it past him. It's quite possible that he was involved, or at least took some time to go and check out what 4chan was saying. But all in all, the idea that he was actually radicalized by this group, to me, is a little ridiculous. Now, over the last couple days, concerning the Toronto attack, we have had new video footage come out. There was two actually that came out. One was from a security camera that was on the that was right along Yonge Street where the original crash took place. But then we also have this video here, which comes from, it'll say actually where the area is in just a minute. So as we can see, yes, top right. It's Shepherd Avenue West and Beecroft Road. So as we can see here, we're just going to just get through this. Now this is lucky because this woman right here is going by, and then you can see Manation coming up. There was also just a stroller just a minute ago. They just got off the road because this guy, boom, right through the red light and keeps on going, and that's the Red Riders fan that we see. Now, if you go on Google Maps and you just go right behind there, you will see that it's just a little bit farther where Emanation ends up getting stopped. Now, as we see here, it's going to be coming up any minute now. Maybe it took a little longer than I thought. Yeah, I think I can see him coming up. So we can see that the cop who arrested Emanation is now coming up. There he is, and he's going through. So that's his cruiser, his undercover cruiser that we ended up seeing. So yeah, there's that woman that we saw right there. Right there. We also had two people crossing the road as well. How lucky that they just turned out that they did not start crossing just minutes sooner. Minutes later, actually, because they could have been dead. They really could have been killed by Emanation. I don't see why he wouldn't. It was 2 women, and he clearly has his beef with women. So this is so this ended up coming out on the 26th of April, and it was updated on the 27th of April. And the other one, I don't think I'm going to show it, actually, because it is kind of graphic, and you can see, they do blur it out, but there is definitely somebody on camera who gets hit. So I don't think I'm actually going to show it. But if you end up just, if you really want to check it out, you go onto Google and Google Toronto attack security video, and you will find it. Global News has it if you're really interested in, if you are interested in checking out that video. You can go ahead and take care of that. But yeah, I thought about it, but I decided I didn't want to show it didn't want to show it here. A little bit graphic. So the other thing about this is it really bugs me too, is the fact that ever since this attack has happened, well, right after the attack happened, the Air Canada Centre ended up in Toronto, ended up starting to put out concrete barricades in order to, in case an attack like this happened to take place as well. But now we're starting to see this across different areas of Toronto. And this is the point we seem to be at. We're very similar to what's going on in Europe. I also happen to be just maybe about Thursday, I think it was last week. Yeah, it was Thursday. So that was the 26th of April. I happen to be going past in Ottawa because I live there. I happen to be going past the Department of National Defense, and they too happen to have those concrete barriers set up just in case anything like that sort of happened. So this is the point we're starting to get to. The last thing I wanted to bring up when discussing the attack and the elimination thing is the fact that there's been 2 narratives that were going around on social media when we heard about the van attack, and I'm pretty sure you can probably guess what the 2 are. On the conservative right-wing side, it was people believing that it was radical Islamic terrorists who had done this. On the other side, the more leftist progressive camp, they were thinking it happened to be white supremacy terrorism. So this was the narratives going around, and because the media tends to have a left-wing bias, they focused on the fact that many more conservatives and right-wingers were focusing on the fact that they pretty much saying that they were hoping that it was going to be radical Islamic extremists, that they were all just foaming from the mouth and wringing their fingers in the fact that it just so happened to be a radical Muslim who did this, even though Mination didn't turn out to be a radical Muslim. So my problem with this is because they have the idea completely wrong when they say that conservatives and right-wingers wanted it to be Muslim. That's not the case at all. It wasn't that the conservatives wanted it to be a right-winger. It's not like the conservatives and right-wingers wanted it to be a Muslim. No, in fact, just like everybody else, the conservative right-wingers didn't want this to happen in the first place. Nobody wanted a goddamn terrorist attack, even though I don't know if they're actually saying that they were hoping that a terrorist attack happened from the conservative and right-winger side, but that seemed to be implied from some of these articles that were coming out. But here's where I see the big problem is with this idea, is the fact that the conservatives and right-wingers are going off merely a pattern. This is why many believed it may have been a Muslim who was doing this, a radical Muslim. It's not because they were hoping it was a radical Muslim just to fuel the talking points or fuel the ideology or tell them that they're right. It's because there has been a pattern going on, a series of patterns since 2015 that ISIS has encouraged people to use cars to mow down large groups of people because it's turned out to be more effective than grabbing a gun in most situations. So we've had enough attacks that went on in the Middle East with cars. We've had enough attacks that have gone on in France and other European countries. And we've also had enough that happened just this past year in England. where we were having cars that were being run into crowds of people by radical Muslims. So when a car ran into a group of people here, the conservatives and right-wingers were going off the pattern that this usually did seem to come from radical Islamic groups. Now, they were wrong on that. It was not a radical Muslim who ended up doing this. But at least from the way I picture it, it's a lot more understanding where the conservatives and right-wingers came from, talking about it possibly being a radical Muslim, than where the left-wingers are coming from, talking about being white supremacy. The only thing that the left-wing camp has to use as an example of this sort of attack would be Charlottesville. That's the only thing that they can go to. The only example they can use where a car is used as a weapon by white supremacists to cause damage and cause death. So the idea from the left-wing camp that this would be a white supremacist terrorist is much more of a I don't remember what the actual phrase is or the terminology is for it, but it's a piper dream. Yes, this is much more of a piper dream for the left-wing camp to think it's going to be white supremacist terrorists than it would be for the conservatives and the right-wing camp to believe that it was radical Muslim extremists. One, we have a pattern. In another, we have a one-time situation. Now, on top of that, I don't know how much merit there is to this, but apparently a professor who is associated with Antifa, I cannot remember where the university right now, maybe it has something to do down in Charlottesville, but there's a claim from that a professor was bragging that he had chased the driver down the road with a gun, and then the crash happened minutes later. But anyway, the idea then that the mainstream media was going to chastise the right for believing that it might have been a radical Muslim is just simply ridiculous, considering how many people in the left-wing camp were hoping it was a white supremacist. Not all, of course, but then again, not all right-wingers and conservatives were believing that it was a radical Muslim. In fact, one thing I did see coming from a lot of conservatives that I did not see coming from the left was I saw a number of conservatives that said, do not jump to conclusions until we know. There were some I followed on Twitter that even said, it's like, until we know for sure that this was a radical Muslim, don't go saying it was radical Islamic terrorism, because if it turns out to be wrong, which it was, then it's going to look very bad on conservatives and right-wingers, considering how this is already what the left likes to pin on the right these days. So I think with that, for the time being, for tonight, I am done in talking about the Toronto attack, though. Hopefully, we won't be seeing any more of its sort anytime soon, though. So, how about we move on now to talk about Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party's handling of the Kinder Morgan pipeline. So we've already heard enough that Justin Trudeau and his Liberal Party have done very little in actually helping out Kinder Morgan get this project back underway. There's been a number of protests, and there was the bitch fight between Alberta and the BC governments, between Notley and Horgan. And Trudeau had the authority to get the pipeline back on track. He did have the authority to get it done. He chose not to, because when we're talking about pipelines, that actually falls under the federal jurisdiction. So Trudeau could have gotten that project up and running, but he didn't. And he liked to claim that he was doing something in order to try and get this project back on track, but he wasn't. In fact, he was actively doing the opposite, because over the last couple days, it has come out now that there is job posting for Organizing Assistant Canada Summer Jobs Program. So this is the same summer jobs program that Justin Trudeau said that if you were a pro-life group, you couldn't receive funding from the government. So that was bad enough. But then if we see here, this job for a closing date was May 21st, 2018. Salary $15 an hour. Full-time and temporary work, 9 to 12-week position. Desired start date, June 1st, 2018, Vancouver. And it says here, The Canada Summer Jobs Program will work directly with Dogwood provincial organizers and the field organizing team to help our organizing network stop the Kinder Morgan pipeline and tanker project, as well as help us strengthen the public call for stronger, more accountable, and transparent democracy. So Trudeau, who has claimed that he's done everything within his power to get this project back online, has done the complete opposite. He is actively funding these protest groups that have shut down the Kinder Morgan pipeline. And he's also at least showing what seems to be some support for the government putting about $2 billion of our taxpayer money into the Kinder Morgan project, subsidizing it, thereby subsidizing another organization, another company underneath the government. We have enough companies and enough industries that have been subsidized these days that are really underneath government control because of this. Because it's government subsidizing, they now have a say in how things are run and how things are done. So why? Why is Trudeau then actively looking to hurt the Alberta people and any oil workers, anybody who happens to be in the field? Why? Especially considering how just a few days before this came out, he was seen in Alberta in, as he always does, playing Mr. Dress-Up, in Alberta, in these oil industries, and he's trying to act like he's there fighting for them. Meanwhile, just a few days later, it turns out that, again, as we can see, that he is actively funding the counter-protesters. And again, I ask, why? Why is Trudeau actively funding the counter-protesters? Maybe it has something to do with this. So this right here details the strategy of landlocking our oil. Yes, making sure that our oil does not get out to the rest of the world, that we can't trade it overseas, or I don't know if when they talk about landlocking it, I don't even know if they're talking about reducing trade with the U.S. even. I'm sure they are. But as we can see, hold on, we got it here. I actually didn't end up highlighting this. Here we go. From the very beginning, the campaign strategy was to landlock the tar sands so the crude could not reach the international market where it could fetch a high price per barrel. This meant national and grassroots organizations to block all proposed pipelines. This is exactly what's going on right now. Because one thing that also started to come out more and more is people are starting to now investigate the idea of the indigenous groups being against the pipelines, because we hear all the time about these protests from the indigenous groups, how much they hate the pipelines and how it's infringement on their land and their people and their culture. So we're hearing a lot about this, and this is actually always one of the main things that government and anti-pipeline protesters like to use as their defense is the indigenous people and the fact that they need permission in order to build the pipeline on their land. They need their consent. However, we're starting to figure out that a lot more indigenous people, including chiefs, are actually much more pro-pipeline than we originally believed. This is, to me, it actually makes more sense because it would benefit the indigenous people too. I mean, granted, if you're having a pipeline that's going over their land, that could cause some problems, and the indigenous people are very big about their spirituality and nature. But all in all, I'm sure that the indigenous people, with the way that their quality of life is, how so many of them live in poverty, I'm sure many of them would actually gladly see a pipeline built if it actually meant that more money could come into their communities and the quality of life could go up. However, this goes against Trudeau and his Liberal government with their green energy program and everything that they want to do. It also goes against them wanting to put a carbon price on the oil sands and across Canada, which would just be devastating for us. Already, as it stands, Alberta oil is worth 50% of what it should be, so they're only bringing in half the revenue. And it's getting to the point now where Alberta is once again getting pissed off with Ottawa, getting pissed off with the East because of the equalization payments. Right now, their province is like the rest of Canada. You know, it's struggling a little bit, but Alberta has always been the breadbasket for Canada. Technically, I don't think I'm using that term right. I think the breadbasket is supposed to stand for those that produce agriculture, but that's where we'll call it the coin purse. That's where the coin purse of Ottawa is. That's where all the money comes from. Canada's coin purse. That's what Alberta is. However, ever since Trudeau's come in office, he's waged practically a war against the West, a war against Alberta, especially concerning their oil sands. So they're starting to get fed up. And many Albertans have stated in the past that they were okay with the equalization payments for the sole fact that, yeah, some of their money was being taken out, but you know what? Their quality of life was still good, so they could at least stand it. Okay, you know, if you want to take some money for the equalization payments, we can stand that. Well, quality of life is going down in Alberta. Quality of life is not what it used to be just a few years ago in Alberta, especially when you're attacking their oil so much. Well, of course the quality of living is going to go down. So, once again, Alberta is getting pissed off with Ottawa and the rest, which is just fueling the idea of a separation from Eastern Canada. Now, I don't know how serious this is right now. I don't think it's really in any serious stages where anybody in Canada needs to actually worry about it actively, like it's some sort of Quebec referendum 2.0 where there's actually a risk of Alberta and the West splitting off, but you never know. There's been lots of talk in the past of Alberta and the rest of Western provinces, such as Saskatchewan and Manitoba, just splitting off from Canada and becoming their own country.
Oh, excuse me.
Now, again, I don't actually believe that this is a real threat right now, but considering how much money Alberta makes and how much they actually pay to the equalization payments, I'm sure they could find some loophole in order to make their message known. I'm sure they could find something in there that could maybe at least make them delay the equalization payments, pretty much put pressure on Eastern Canada. However, Trudeau is not going to go along with this. Trudeau is so invested in the progressive agenda that it doesn't matter to him. In the end of the day, as long as he has his voter base, it doesn't matter to Trudeau. He's just like any other politician. He's just a man who wants to stay in office for as long as possible. And he'll do whatever it takes in order to do this. So if it means throwing some more money in this field or that field, he'll absolutely do it. I mean, hell, we're watching Kathleen Wynne do it right now as her poll numbers are so atrocious and as her attacks against Doug Ford have failed. In fact, people have said that they've done some of the opposite. She just has started throwing money at everything. You get money, you get money, you get money, you get money, you get money. She is acting like she's fucking Oprah right now. That's what she's doing. But there's a difference between throwing money and resources at a problem. Because she's throwing money into the medical field, but guess what? There's not enough doctors and nurses around for people. That's why we're having so many problems when it comes to prioritizing patients in Canada, but even more specifically in Ontario right now. So there's a difference between putting money and resources. So this is where the Liberals don't seem to understand this. Their idea of solving the problem is simply throwing money at the problem. Sure, money does help, definitely. No matter what the problem is, pretty much every time money will help you get through the problem. But if you're only going to throw money at the problem, then absolutely no way are you ever going to fix this. I mean, if you're just going to throw money at the hospitals, but you're not going to do anything in order to fix how understaffed the people are or how overbooked the hospitals are, then nothing's going to change. And this is what we can expect for Trudeau, if we can even apply this to the oil sands, is that we might have something that Trudeau does is throw money at it. For instance, Kinder Morgan, he's throwing $2 billion towards it, or that's what he wants to do. That doesn't mean that the project is then going to get built if he's just facing the same problems as beforehand, the same protests. He needs to do something about this. But once again, Trudeau is so invested in the progressive agenda that there's no reason for him to There's absolutely no reason for Trudeau to actually do something about this, to actually solve the real issue itself. As much as it sucks, I really think we're going down this path until we can vote Trudeau out of office. Until we can vote in, say, a conservative government or something that's actually pro-oil, pro-pipeline. I don't see this issue really getting solved by Justin Trudeau. Now, I do believe that Trudeau would prefer to have the pipeline built. Many people are saying that they don't believe Trudeau wants the pipeline built. I think he would, because it would be revenue brought in. And I even said before that Trudeau's not as anti-pipeline as he made it seem. He's also not pro-pipeline enough. He's found himself an awkward middle ground where the lefty progressives aren't happy with him, his base, and he's not pro-pipeline enough where the right-wingers and conservatives are going to support him either. So he's found himself a very awkward middle ground. But we can't, again, Trudeau's only plan is to throw money at the issue, but that doesn't mean that the pipeline will be able to get built. This doesn't mean that this is actually going to help Alberta or BC in the long run. In fact, BC is just shooting themselves in the foot by doing this. I mean, if Notley can make it that she can shut off the taps going into BC, then it's just going to hurt them so much more. And right now, there's a lot of people that are talking about a boycott BC right now. So a lot of the products that come out of BC, they want to boycott it because they see as what BC has done as affecting the entire country. They see that Horgan and his government, by refusing to get the Trans Mountain Pipeline built and just putting up such a shit fit, that it's hurt Alberta, it's hurt jobs across the country, and it's hurt our economy. So because of it, people are wanting to boycott BC. The problem with this, the only real problem I have with this, is the fact that this is the actions of the government. And many people are going to boycott the products, which are going to hurt the citizens of BC in there. When the citizens of BC are not necessarily the ones who have led to this situation. It's the government of BC. However, what can you really do? What can you really do in order to send a message to the BC government without hurting the people itself? I don't really think there is a way. So this boycott BC thing it's going to hurt them a lot more because, again, I know a couple people that are out there that are hurting from gas prices right now, and it's going to hurt them a lot more. Again, wine was something that Premier Rachel Notley not too long ago wanted to ban. BC wine coming into Alberta. And this was because BC wine is a big part of their economy. At least in Alberta. Alberta buys a lot of BC wine from them, so this would definitely hurt them if they were to boycott this. So, in the end, Horgan has damaged his reputation in Canada, and he's damaged the reputation of BC to the rest of the world, because now everybody's looking at them as if they're enemy number one. Congratulations, BC, it's no longer Quebec. You are now enemy number one to the rest of Canada, apparently. Sorry, Top Leaf. And the final thing I just wanted to talk about today was the caravan that has been, for about the last month, has been going through Mexico, and it's been on its way to the U.S. border because at first there were thousands, or at least a good hundreds of these immigrants, of these South American people who were traveling across Mexico because they wanted to claim asylum in the U.S. And so I think it was just this past day, on Sunday, the remnants of the caravan finally made it. Because as the caravan was going through, Donald Trump was not happy about it, so he definitely made his intentions known to the Mexican government. So the Mexican government did a lot to either settle the people in the region or split up the caravan, but if they couldn't split it up completely, there's not much they could do. Well, I'm sure that's from their perspective. I mean, they are illegally in the Mexican country, so I'm sure they could deport all of them, but that would cost time and money. and it's just easier for the Mexicans to allow the caravan to continue all the way to the Mexican-U.S. border, and that way it becomes America's problem. Well, they are there. They are here now. They are at the wall. And we can see here, there's a bunch of them that are just they've scaled the wall and they're just sitting on it. Now, there's already been several that have been told, we've already been told that there have been some that have already tried to breach the wall and make their way in. However, they are quickly seem to be arrested. On top of this, the U.S. is saying that this crossing right here is full. It is completely full, and therefore they can't do anything about taking on any of these immigrants. But I think this is actually symptoms of a bigger problem. Before, though, I actually wanted to address this point right here in the video. We're just going to turn on volume for this. So the main thing I really had a question on about that video is, what the hell are these people celebrating? Seriously, what are they celebrating? Because they have no right to be at the wall and get accepted in by America, yet they're celebrating the fact they've made it as if this is supposed to mean something, as if the fact that they've made it to the U.S. border suddenly means, okay, now America has to take us in. America doesn't have to do anything it doesn't fucking want. If America wants to reject every single one of these people standing at their wall, they absolutely can. And this is symptoms of a bigger problem that's going around that is being faced by first world countries, which is the fact that many people are coming from around the world and believe they have a right to settle in our countries. Here's a perfect example. These people have crossed from South America all the way up through Mexico to the American border as if it's their right to be there, as if going into America is their right. How ridiculous of an idea is this? And this is very similar to what we're experiencing with the border walls right now. Canada is experiencing with the illegal boarding crossings right now, is all these people are coming up into Canada believing that they have some sort of right to come here, that they're just going to be accepted because they're here. But that's absolutely ridiculous to even assume that. There's absolutely no reason that these people here should be taken in by the American government. And actually, in my opinion, every single one of these people should be rejected. For the sole fact that if you start letting some of these people in, how long until the next caravan makes its way up through Mexico to the American border? How long? It's going to happen, because if it's already happened once and people see that you're willing to let them in, it's going to continue. Once again, America, take a lesson from Canada. Because right now, this is what's going on. Our government last year faced these illegal crossings. And what did they do about it? Nothing. They did absolutely nothing. All they said was put out a fucking message saying, well, if you come to Canada, it doesn't mean we're going to take you. You know, you still have to go through legal processes. But they still did nothing. In fact, Trudeau has dedicated some $200 million in processing illegal immigrants this year in the 2018 budget. So he clearly has no intentions of really doing much about these immigrants. He's not going to be sending them back. Many of them are being housed right now, and it requires government funding in order to do so. Because of this, 30% of everybody inside a Toronto homeless shelter right now are asylum seekers. By the end of the summer, that'll be 50%. This is what happens when you don't have any regulation on your border. And Canada, our chickens are coming home to roost. This is what's happening. Canada has the longest undefended border in the world, and we have been graced with that because we lived right next to America in the south, and we have such a good relationship with America. We don't worry about them invading. And even if Americans do cross illegally, it's not a big deal. It's really not a big deal. What, they're crossing, coming to stay for a little bit, probably go home. Some are coming to stay. It does happen. But we've never seen numbers such as this in our own country. We've never had so many trying to cross our border. This is why our chickens have come home to roost, because we did nothing to defend our border, that when we actually faced a crisis, we didn't know what to do. To this day, we don't know what to do. Actually, that's not true. We do know what to do. The government is refusing to do anything about it. The government is refusing to act on this, to actually try and stop these people or deport these people. And this is the problem that you, America, is going to have with this caravan if you let these people in. It's not going to end. It's going to get worse. What was it? What was the total number of this caravan? I think they said maybe at one point it reached 1,200 people. Yeah, guess what? That's small compared to the next caravan that is going to come up. And you know what else is going to happen? Smuggling. Smuggling is already a problem as it stands for America, especially among the southern border. Now, if you have this caravan that comes on your border and is demanding entrance and you give it to them, well, you've just created a business proposition for anybody else who wants to profit on this. We're seeing it again in Canada. Many of these asylum seekers crossing our border, there's literally a smuggling ring going on to get them up to the American border, where people will drive them and house them. This is exactly what you're going to see, only on a much larger scale. So that's why I think America should not let any of these people in, is because this is only the beginning. And it shows a lack of respect for America as a country if these people can believe that they can just show up on their border and be let in. I mean, if you suddenly had a group of people showing up on your doorstep and demanding to be let in, would you do it? No, you wouldn't, because who are these people showing up on your doorstep demanding access to your house, your food, your money, your resources? Who are these people? Fuck them. How disrespectful of them to do that. So we're just talking about a house on a much grander scale when we're talking about a country. We're talking about a family that's just much bigger on the scale of things. You know, take the word family with a grain of salt. But, you know, we all have some connection here in our own countries. And then we have people from other countries just showing up, no questions asked. And again, many of these people are not coming in going to be supporting themselves. I'm sure there are plenty of people that will come in and will want to come in and will want to get to work and be like, all right, I want to work for my living. I want to work hard. I want to pay my taxes. I want to become an American citizen. I'm sure there's going to be some in there that think that way. But my guess is the majority of them do not think that way. The majority of them are coming to America as economic migrants. They are coming in claiming to be asylum seekers when really they're just looking for a better standard of life. This is actually the problem with the UN. I know this sounds like a weird shift that I'm doing to go to the UN, but many of our refugee statuses and how the policies to handle refugees that are done in the first world are done underneath UN policies. So the UN has taken away that sovereign right of many countries in order to decide, for instance, who they let in, and that includes asylum seekers / refugees. But that's been completely taken away simply by the UN, who demands that anybody who comes in demanding a refuge be looked after. But in this idea that the UN presents, it never specifies and says, well, you need to look after them and then, you know, they need to look after themselves, get a job and support themselves. No, it just says you got to let them in and look after them. And how do you do that? You put them on government assistance. Well, many of them don't stop the government assistance once it begins. It just puts a tax on our system and it drains the hell out of us. And it is us, the taxpayer, who pay for that. It is us, the taxpayer, or in this case in America, the American taxpayer, who has to foot the bill for that. So many of these people in this caravan are going to come in, they're going to live a very decent life on someone else's dime, and many of them are not going to give much back to the people who have provided so much for them. And once again, you let them in, the others are just going to follow. The rest of them are just going to continue to flow in. There's going to be more caravans, bigger caravans than there were before. And the thing that makes me nervous about this is with everything that's going on our border right now. I wouldn't be surprised that if some of these migrants even continued up north and were saying, well, yeah, we made it into America, but that land Canada up there we've been hearing good things about that. So that's also my other concern with this. So, at risk of repeating myself again, America, you need to make sure you do not let any of these people in. Or at least not without a very strict vetting process. And I, again, would not offer any of these people a form of government assistance. Maybe a very temporary one for a first couple months or something. Nothing more than that. You give them any more than that, they're just going to take. So we'll just have to wait and see what moves Donald Trump and the American people make. I get the feeling that the next time I am on the Red Eye stream, it's going to be a very interesting stream. That actually, maybe tomorrow. I might jump in with them tomorrow, actually. Monday at like whatever, 6:30 is usually when they start up. But so maybe I'll jump in with them there because I feel this is going to be one of the topic of conversation that they're involved in. For those who don't know, the Red Eye stream is one, just a couple of friends that I have. They're Americans, so most of the focus on American news, American politics, but great stream, always a good time. So maybe I'll jump on there tomorrow. We'll see. But I hope that the American people and Donald Trump do the right thing and protect their borders. Because you know what? My country's not doing that right now, and we are seeing the consequences of it. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today, everyone. My name's Adrian Lloyd. This is Just My Stupid Opinion, and I'll see you all soon.